The boarding ramp of the UES Nostalgia hissed open, and Warlord X the Unyielding, devourer of the spiral, breaker of 9 sovereign fleets, conqueror of 300 systems and change, ducked through the hatch expecting the perfume of terror. He got potpourri, cinnamon apples specifically. His honor guard filed in behind him, 12 warriors in obsidian scale plate, each one bred in gravity vats to snap starship hulls like bread crusts. They fanned across the human bridge with weapons raised and slowly, collectively, tilted their heads. A lava lamp burbled on the navigation console, casting orange blobs across a tactical display. A poster of a small earth feline dangling from a branch commanded them to hang in there. Beside the captain's chair, laminated and mounted under a tiny spotlight like the relic of a dead saint, hung a rectangle of blue and yellow plastic reading Blockbuster Video, member since 1994. "What?" rumbled X, in a voice that had made planetary governors soil their ceremonial robes. "Is this place of madness?" "It's called." Commander Sarah stood at the center of the bridge, arms crossed, dark curls escaping a regulation bun that had clearly given up around hour 6 of the blockade. She was flanked by a skeleton crew of officers who looked less like captured prey and more like people annoyed that company had shown up unannounced. "You scuffed my ramp, by the way. That's coming out of your reparations." The warlord's crimson eyes narrowed. In 3 centuries of conquest, no species had greeted him with an itemized complaint. Behind Sarah, a man in a gray cardigan worn over his uniform, an atrocity of protocol poured coffee into a chipped mug that read World's OKAYESD husband. He was somewhere past 50, soft around the middle, with reading glasses pushed up into thinning hair. The ship's manifest listed him as David, logistics officer, retired, spouse of commanding officer. He blew on his coffee and gave the 12-foot alien warlord a polite little nod, the kind you'd give a neighbor mowing his lawn. "Honey," David said, "did we feed Whiskers?" "You had one job, David." "I had several jobs. We're being invaded." "The cat doesn't know that." X's translator implant sparked, attempted to parse the exchange, flagged it as possible coded warcant, and quietly rebooted. The warlord stepped forward, deck plates groaning beneath armored boots forged in the heart of a dying sun. "Human commander, your border fleets have fallen. Your station at's gate burns. I require the surrender codes for your species, and I require them now, or I will paint this bridge with." "Counteroffer," Sarah said. The bridge went still. One of the honor guard made a sound like a startled kettle. "You withdraw from human space, pay for the ramp, and this part's non-negotiable. Your empire funds the construction of one fully operational Blockbuster Video franchise at a location of my choosing." She ticked the terms off on her fingers with the serene confidence of a woman returning shoes without a receipt. "Late fees apply. Be kind. Rewind." X stared. His intelligence officer, a wiry creature named, frantically scrolled through cultural databases, whispering, "My lord, I believe Blockbuster may be a weapons platform. The records are fragmented. It apparently destroyed itself." The whispering had begun among his guard, and that was the true danger, worse than any human fleet. X ruled an empire built on a single currency: fear. Fear kept 300 systems kneeling. Fear kept his own warriors loyal. And here, on this absurd little vessel that smelled like a scented candle, 12 of his finest were watching 2 small mammals bicker about a cat, and something in the mathematics of terror was quietly, catastrophically failing. "You are not afraid," the warlord said. It came out almost wounded. Sarah's expression flickered just once, just for David, a glance across the bridge that carried 26 years of marriage in half a second. "I've got this." His glance back. "I know you do." He took another sip of coffee. His hand, noted absently, was perfectly steady. "Afraid?" Sarah turned back to the warlord, and now her voice dropped its sarcasm like a coat. "I've sat through timeshare presentations I survived my mother-in-law's Thanksgivings. I gave a eulogy at my best friend's funeral and taught a room full of academy cadets the next morning because that's the job. You flew across a galaxy to scare me, big guy." She stepped closer into his shadow, 5'6" of unbothered. "You should called ahead. I'd have told you to save the fuel." Later, much later, in testimony before the Imperial Inquiry, would say that this was the moment. Not a tactical failure, not an intelligence gap, a heartbeat in which the most feared being in the known galaxy realized that his entire empire rested on a currency this species simply refused to accept, and that every warrior on that bridge could see it. Fear, when cornered, does what fear always does. X moved faster than something that size should move. One gauntleted hand, black scales veined with gold, closed around Sarah's throat and lifted her off the deck. Two human officers lunged. Honor guards slammed them back against the consoles, a scaled forearm crushing across the throat of a young lieutenant who screamed her name. Sarah's boots kicked air. Her hands clawed at fingers that had crumpled battleship armor. "Learn," the warlord thundered, "what defiance costs." Her eyes found David across the bridge, not pleading, not even afraid. 26 years of marriage in half a second. "I'm sorry about the mug thing. Feed the cat." The sound that followed was small and final and wrong in a room so full of humming machinery. X let the commander's body fall to the deck beside the captain's chair, beneath the laminated relic of blockbuster video, and turned to survey the horror he had restored, the currency, flowing again. The human officers were frozen. The lieutenant was sobbing. "Good, good." But his guards weren't looking at the body. They were looking at the husband. David had not screamed. He had not lunged. He stood exactly where he'd been standing, and with great care, the way a man handles the last object he intends to be gentle with for some time, he set the world's OKAYEST husband mug down on the console. He removed his reading glasses, folded them, slipped them into the cardigan's pocket. Then he began methodically to unbutton the cardigan itself, and somewhere in the ship's walls, unbidden, every screen on the bridge flickered and changed. Tactical displays, star charts, the lava lamp's diagnostic panel, all of them replaced by the same three glowing characters. 300, 259, 258. "My lord," whispered, staring at his scanner at a personnel file that was unlocking itself layer by classified layer, redactions peeling away like burnt skin, "the mail, his records. My lord, why is he smiling?" David draped the cardigan over the captain's chair, over his wife's still hand, and rolled up his sleeves. 3 minutes, he said softly, to no one and to everyone. "She always said I never finish anything on time. Let's prove her wrong." 258. Scanner was screaming at him in the polite way Imperial technology screamed, soft chimes, red glyphs. The words "clearance insufficient" dissolving one by one as something on the human ship overrode his empire's finest encryption like a parent taking a toy from a toddler. Reyes, David M. Logistics Officer, retired. The word logistics peeled away. Reyes, David M. Series Incident, sole survivor. "My lord," whispered. "Titan Campaign, Data EXPUNGEDBY Treaty, CASULTIS inflicted, SCALED by unanimous Galactic Accord. Reason for retirement, WANTED to spend more time with my wife." And then the surfaced, and understood why the file had been buried under treaties, because some names aren't classified to protect information. Some names are classified the way you seal a tomb. Designation, the ghost of Titan. Had grown up on that story. Every hatchling in the Empire had the campfire horror about the war before this one, the single human who walked out of a burning moon and into 3 enemy armadas, and how afterward there were no more armadas, and the elders always ended it the same way. And that is why we do not go past the Saul line, little ones. A myth, a cautionary fairy tale. The fairy tale was rolling up his sleeves 10 feet away, and X had just murdered his wife. Kill him, the warlord roared. 231. 3 honor guards moved, vat-bred titans, reflexes tuned by gene forges, shields calibrated to shrug off plasma lances. Which was precisely the problem. David would have explained if he'd felt chatty. Plasma shielding is frequency locked. It stops directed energy. It does absolutely nothing about a fire extinguisher swung sidearm into a kneecap by an angry man from Ohio. The first guard dropped, howling, into the path of the second, and David was already gone from where he'd been, moving not fast exactly, but early, the way water is early, arriving in each space the instant it opened. He'd taken the extinguisher's pin out somewhere in transit. White fog erupted across the bridge, and inside it the humans heard sounds their nightmares would keep. Armor seams popping, a guard's own shock pike discharging into its owner, duct tape, shrieking off the roll. The fog thinned. 2 guards lay taped to the navigation console, cocooned like silver mummies. A third was wearing the lava lamp. It was still plugged in. Orange blobs drifted serenely across his unconscious face. "You broke my mug," David said. Everyone looked. The world's OKAYEST husband mug lay in shards where a guard's boot had caught the console. David regarded the pieces with a terrible gentleness. "Sarah gave me that mug." He picked up a stapler from the comm station, weighed it. "Anniversary, 19th. She said, David, it's funny because it's true." The stapler left his hand at roughly 40 miles per hour and folded the 4th guard's helmet inward at the exact junction where Imperial engineers had assumed no projectile would ever be so rude. It was funny. 147. 8 decks up and 40,000 kilometers out, the invasion of human space experienced what Imperial historians would later call, with heroic understatement, the reversal. It began when the Nostalgia's distress transponder, reactivated by whatever ship brain had started that countdown, broadcast 2 words in the clear, unencrypted on every channel at once: "Ghost active." On the bridge of the dreadnought Inevitable Dominion, Fleet Admiral heard those words, looked at the fairy tale corner of his own childhood, and issued the fastest order of his career. "All ships, reverse, now." 40,000 warships attempting to simultaneously flee a solar system they had spent 3 weeks invading produced the greatest traffic catastrophe in galactic history. Battle cruisers collided with supply barges. 2 carrier groups jumped blind into the same coordinates and had to be apart. The Emperor's emergency hotline, overwhelmed, placed Fleet Admiral in a queue and played him soothing conquest anthems while a recorded voice assured him his apocalypse was very important to them. Human Fleet Command, for its part, received the Nostalgia's transponder ping at Luna Station, where Admiral was eating a sandwich. She read the 2 words. She set down the sandwich. She rubbed her eyes with the exhausted resignation of a woman who had personally signed David's retirement papers and had believed, truly believed, they'd all get to keep pretending. "Oh no," she said, "someone made Dave sad." "Ma'am, should we scramble the fleet?" "For what? To help them." She picked the sandwich back up. "Send flowers and find out who we bill for the cleanup." 052. On the bridge it was down to X. The warlord had stopped shouting. He stood in the wreckage of his honor guard with his war blade drawn, the blade that had ended kings. And for the first time in 300 years of conquest he was backing up, 1 deck plate at a time, because the small, soft creature walking toward him through the fog wasn't attacking. It was waiting, glancing every few seconds at the countdown. "You could have gone home," David said. His voice was level. That was the unbearable part, the level voice, the reading glasses creased still in his hair, the cardigan draped over the chair like a flag over a coffin. "She offered you terms. They were good terms. The blockbuster thing was mostly a joke, mostly." He stepped over a groaning guard. 26 years I kept a promise to her. No more fighting, grow tomatoes, feed the cat. 26 years, and you undid it in 1 second. And here's what you need to understand about that. 010. "It's not that you killed her," David said. "It's that you made her late." 003. X's remaining eye flicked to the countdown. Late, he rasped. For what? 000. Every screen on the bridge went white. Beneath the laminated blockbuster card beside the captain's chair, Commander Sarah drew a breath like a diver surfacing, deep, ragged, furious, and her eyes snapped open with the pale shimmer of a cortical lattice completing its reboot cycle, because the Empire's intelligence services had never learned the one secret humanity actually kept. Senior officers don't carry weapons into negotiations. They carry backups. She sat up. She cracked her neck, left then right. She took in the taped guards, the fog, the stapler, her husband's rolled-up sleeves, and finally the warlord froze in mid-retreat with an expression that no Gene Forge had ever designed his face to make. 3 minutes, Sarah said hoarsely. She rose, steadying herself on the captain's chair, and lifted the cardigan off it, folding it once neatly over her arm, the way you'd hold a coat for someone you loved. You waited the whole 3 minutes and you didn't finish him. That's the most romantic thing you've done in a decade. I wanted you to see it, David said. God, I love you. She turned to X and her smile was the smile from the ramp, the shoes without receipt smile, except now there was voltage under it. Okay, big guy, where were we? Oh, right. She rolled her shoulders. Now I'm renegotiating. X the Unyielding did the only sensible thing left in the universe. He ran. His retreat was not dignified. It involved hurling his war blade, which David caught, examined, and set politely on the console like a confiscated toy, then blowing the bridge's emergency bulkhead and pounding down the boarding corridor toward his shuttle while 2 humans strolled after him at a walking pace, which was somehow worse than being chased. He's heading for the port airlock, Sarah said, pulling her hair back into a fresh bun as they walked. Vent conduits faster. Vent conduit, then a left at the hydroponics junction, cut him off at the coupling ring. Yes, David glanced at her. You died again, Sarah. It was 3 minutes, David, you enormous baby. That's not the point. There was a funeral last time. Your mother flew in. I had to make small talk with your mother for a week, and then you showed up at the reception asking why nobody saved you cake. And whose fault was the cake? They reached the junction. Sarah put 2 fingers to her lips and whistled, and a maintenance drone obligingly sealed the corridor ahead of the fleeing warlord with a cheerful bonk. You knew the reboot window. You wrote the reboot protocol. After series, everything hurts differently, David said quietly, and for one step, just one, his level voice wasn't level. Watching it never gets easier, even knowing. Sarah's hand found his and squeezed once, 26 years in half a second. I know, I'm here. I came back. I always come back. And then X rounded the corner into hydroponics, and the moment folded itself away for later, the way soldiers' moments do. What followed was less a battle than a duet. Cowering behind a tomato planter with his scanner still recording, watched the 2 humans move through the garden bay like one organism with a marital dispute, Sarah high, David low, her throwing a seed tray precisely where his sweep would send the warlord stumbling, him tipping an irrigation line exactly where her elbow would need the footing slick. They never once looked at each other. They argued the entire time. Dinner Friday, you hate I hate Greg is delightful. Sarah ducked a flailing gauntlet and stapled X's cape to a bulkhead in one motion. And we owe them for the thing with the cat. 3 of the warlord's crew, watching through internal cameras, quietly began to the Imperial net. Within minutes, 40 billion citizens across 300 subjugated systems were watching X the Unyielding, breaker of 9 sovereign fleets, get slapped with a garden trowel while pinned to a wall by his own cape. The clip acquired captions. The captions acquired music. By the time the warlord tore free and hurled himself into his shuttle, he was no longer an emperor's fist. He was a meme, and empires built on fear do not survive laughter. A fact his war priests confirmed an hour later aboard the flagship Inevitable Dominion, in the worst theological briefing of his life. "Explain it to me again," X said. He was hunched on his obsidian throne, one eye swollen, cape stapled at odd intervals. Slowly. The eldest priest consulted scripture with shaking claws. "Their dead return, my lord. Death is to their senior castes a scheduling inconvenience. Their warriors do not retire from weakness but from contentment, which our doctrine has no word for. And their fear response is," he hesitated, "inverted. Threat produces in them a state our scholars are provisionally calling pettiness, which appears to be inexhaustible and self-replenishing." "The economy, my lord," whispered the treasurer, "is also collapsing. Fear tribute from the outer systems has stopped. They've all seen the trowel footage. Meridian 4 has declared independence and their formal notice was just the clip, looped, with a horn section." And then the transmission came through, audio only, hailing from the nostalgia, patched openly across every channel so the whole galaxy could listen. And the human male's calm, level, terrible voice filled the throne room. "I'll be back." Silence. The eldest priest dropped his scripture. In the old tongue of the empire, a declaration of return sworn by a death-conquering revenant was the most binding oath in their theology, the vow of the unkillable pursuer, spoken only once in their scriptures, by their own god of endings. The priests began keening. 2 admirals resigned on the spot by the traditional method of jumping into an escape pod. Who alone had spent the flight researching human culture, tried to explain that it was a quotation from a 1984 entertainment about an unstoppable machine that hunts a single target across time itself and cannot be bargained with, cannot be reasoned with, and absolutely will not stop, and realized midway through that this was not the comforting clarification he'd hoped. Then the woman's voice, brisk, reading from what was audibly a legal pad. "Terms take 2. Full withdrawal from human space. Independence for all 300 occupied systems. Repair of my ramp. And the blockbuster, that one's now mandatory, staffed with a functioning Employee of the Month program. You have 1 hour, be kind. Rewind." The Imperial Institute of, working frantically from fragmentary records, delivered its classified assessment of Blockbuster 19 minutes later. An entertainment distribution of the human late Cold War period. Footprint of over 9,000 installations at peak. Ultimate fate, destroyed by its own species, apparently as a demonstration. A civilization that built 9,000 of something and then casually annihilated it, the report concluded, was signaling that it could do the same to anyone. 3 border systems read the assessment and preemptively surrendered to Earth directly, cutting out the middleman. 1 sent a fruit basket. X sat very still on his throne and watched 300 years of certainty die behind his master's eyes, watched fear, the currency, the creed, the religion, into worthlessness in a single afternoon. What remained when an empire of terror had nothing left to be but terrified? The answer, it turned out, was spite. "Helm," the warlord rose. His voice had gone somewhere new, somewhere past rage into a flat, glassy calm that made even his priests step back. "Charge the core to overload. All remaining ships, slave your drives to mine." He looked at the small blue marble coordinates blooming there and felt his heart stop. "If their fear cannot be purchased, it will be taken. Set course for the human cradle world. We jump to Earth." The Dominion's engines howled. Space tore open. And aboard the Nostalgia, on a bridge still dusted with extinguisher fog, the jump signature lit up Sarah's console in red, and she read the destination twice because the first time didn't seem possible. "David," her voice was careful, "he's going to Earth." David was sweeping up the shards of his mug and he paused and looked up, and what crossed his face wasn't fear. The scanner, still transmitting, would have found no trace of it. It was something closer to pity. "Earth," David repeated. He checked his watch. On a Sunday in October. He set down the dustpan. God help him, it's football season. The alien escort cruiser had 11 security lockouts, a gene-coded ignition, and a helm interface designed to be unusable by any species with fewer than 3 hearts. David it in 90 seconds. It's basically an 87, he said, elbow deep in a console, sparks jumping off his wedding ring. Insecure about it, and everything important is behind one panel they assumed nobody would check. The drive core coughed, caught, and roared. There we go. Listen to that. That's the sound of somebody's warranty dying. Sarah dropped into the gunner's cradle, which had been built for a creature twice her size, so she wedged the cardigan behind her back as lumbar support. Who had defected somewhere between the trowel and the fruit basket, on the grounds that he wished to be on the winning side of history, and also the humans had snacks, strapped himself into the jump seat, and tried not to think about what 40 billion viewers were seeing now. Because the galaxy was watching. Every feed, every relay, every species that had ever paid fair tribute to the Empire had its eyes on 2 blips racing toward a small blue world. The inevitable Dominion, 40,000 slaved warships trailing behind it like a poisoned comet, and 1 stolen cruiser flown by a retiree in rolled-up sleeves. The Galactic Exchange suspended trading after Imperial Fear Futures lost 90% of their value in an hour. A commodities analyst on Prime asked what investors were buying instead, stared into the camera for a long moment and said, "Cardigans." "Time to Earth?" Sarah asked. "They jump in 11 minutes. We arrive in 9. David's hands moved across the stolen controls like he'd flown this ship in a previous life, which was beginning to suspect covered most ships. Kickoffs at 1. "You think the grid will hold?" "Sweetheart," David smiled, and it was the first fully warm smile had seen from him, and somehow that was the most frightening data point yet. "You know who runs the grid." Space split open above Earth, and the Unyielding arrived at the cradle of humanity with 40,000 warships, an overloading core, and a speech prepared. He never gave the speech. He had braced for planetary shields, for missile fields, for the massed fleets of a terrified species making its final stand. What his sensors actually showed him in the crisp October sunlight of the Western Hemisphere were parking lots. Thousands of them, ringing stadiums like votive candles, hazed with charcoal smoke. His long-range optics resolved folding chairs, foam hands the size of shield generators, a banner strung across something called ins, "Welcome ALIENS, invade after the game." A child in Cincinnati was selling T-shirts that read Alien Invasion 2026. I was there, and business was brisk, and the invasion had not started yet. "They knew we were coming," X whispered. "They knew, and they tailgated." "My lord," his sensor officer said faintly, "we are receiving a hail. From the surface. It's my lord, it appears to be a neighborhood." The image that filled the Dominions was a sunroom in a suburb of Dayton, Ohio. In it sat 9 elderly humans around a card table. Knitting was present. A pitcher of lemonade sweated gently beside a plate of lemon bars. At the head of the table, a silver-haired woman in a windbreaker embroidered Maple Glen HOMEOWNERS Association looked up over her reading glasses at the Warlord of 300 systems. "You're the one who hurt Sarah," she said. "I am the Unyielding, devourer of—" "Ma'am," she licked her thumb and turned a page in a ledger. "I'm Doris, recording secretary. Also, per Article 12 of the Covenant, acting fire control coordinator for the Northern Hemisphere." She peered at him. "You've parked 40,000 vehicles in orbit without a permit, hun." X laughed. It was not a healthy laugh. "And what will you do, small ancient creature? Knit at me." Doris set down the ledger. Around the table, 8 retirees set down their knitting, and watching the feed from the approaching cruiser, saw what the Warlord's tactical AI saw 1 second too late. The personnel files blooming across the screen, every one of them stamped with expunged campaigns and sealed accords. The ghost of Titan had not been an anomaly. He was a demographic. Humanity's most terrifying generation of soldiers had all retired to the same cul-de-sacs, and they had spent 30 peaceful years channeling their skills into lawn care, casserole logistics, and, per Article 12, an orbital defense grid administered as a homeowners association, because the paperwork structure already existed and nobody wanted to reinvent it. "Marge," said Doris, "he's had his warning, motion to enforce." "Seconded," said Marge, 60 years to the day after seconding nothing over Titan. "All in favor." 9 hands rose. Somewhere beneath a mini-golf course in Boca, beneath a bingo hall in Tucson, beneath the Maple Glen Community Garden's suspiciously reinforced tool shed, humanity's real defense grid woke up and stretched. And across the sky above 40,000 Imperial warships in light and lemon bar-scented wrath, the fleet of the Empire was not destroyed. That was the horror the galaxy never forgot. It was clamped. Tractor arrays seized every hull. Engine signatures died. 40,000 warships hung in orbit, disabled, ticketed, each one tagged with a glowing notice. Improperly PARKAD, see attached schedule of fines. Only the Dominion, its core burning toward overload, tore free and dove for the surface, and one stolen cruiser dove after it. They met on the flagship's bridge. David came through the blast door first, and X was waiting, warblade recovered, cape torn free of its staples, 12 feet of ending backed against his obsidian throne with a core overload timer painting the walls the color of arterial light. Behind David came Sarah, still hoarse, still furious, carrying, noted, everything now for the histories he already knew he'd write, a roll of duct tape and a stapler. "Your world will burn with me," the warlord said. "The core cannot be stopped. This is the mathematics of fear, human. In the end, everything kneels." "See, that's your whole problem." David walked forward, unhurried, water finding its level. "You keep doing math with the wrong numbers." The warblade came down like a falling tower. David wasn't where it landed. "You counted our ships." The blade swept sideways. Sarah's stapler cracked against the warlord's wrist seam, the exact seam, the one his engineers swore no one would find twice. "You counted our weapons." The warlord lunged, and David finally stopped moving away, caught the descending arm on his shoulder, pivoted with a grunt that was half technique and half a 56-year-old back registering a complaint, and used 300 pounds of imperial momentum to introduce X the Unyielding to his own throne, face first. "You never counted the reasons." The duct tape shrieked. It took most of the roll. "The core," X snarled, taped to his throne and stopped, because Sarah had crossed to the engineering console, cracked her knuckles, and typed in an override that dissolved the overload sequence like sugar in rain. "Cortical lattice comes with perks," she said. "I've been backed up on your flagship's network since you strangled me. Rude, by the way, I've read everything. Your logs, your codes, your poetry." He writes poetry. "I know," said, "we've all suffered." X sagged against the tape, and here it came, the moment the whole galaxy leaned toward 40 billion screens, the execution, the vengeance, the mathematics of fear balanced at last. The warlord lifted his chin and found from somewhere the ashes of his dignity. "Finish it then, make me a martyr, show your species' true face." Sarah looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached into her jacket and produced not a weapon but a clipboard, and watched the last comprehension die in the warlord's eyes as she clicked a pen. "X, formerly the Unyielding," she read, "by the authority of the Terran Accords and honestly mostly Article 12 of the Maple Glen Covenant, your empire is dissolved, its 300 systems freed, effective now. Your fleets are impounded pending fines, and you personally are sentenced to community service across every world you conquered, supervised, with performance reviews." She clicked the pen again. "We don't make martyrs, big guy, we make examples. Sign here, and initial the apology tour." He signed. In the end, taped to his own throne, watched by a liberated galaxy, undone by a stapler, a clipboard, and a marriage, X the Unyielding knelt to the only force that had ever truly beaten him: paperwork. The galaxy's official registry was amended within the week. The entry for humanity, once 900 pages of threat assessments, was replaced by a single line: "Do not engage, emotionally weaponized." first-hand chronicle became the best-selling text in 300 systems. And on a former throne world whose obsidian spires now overlooked a strip mall, a very large ex-warlord in a very small blue and yellow apron restocked VHS tapes under the tutelage of a plaque he was legally required to want. Employee of the Month. He was not Employee of the Month. Doris was Employee of the Month. Doris didn't even work there. And far away, on a repaired bridge that smelled of cinnamon apple, beneath a laminated membership card and a kitten poster that had survived it all, Sarah put her feet up on the console while her husband handed her coffee and kept the new mug, World's Okayest Widwer, temporarily, for himself. You fed Whiskers. I fed Whiskers. 26 years, she said, lacing her fingers through his, and you finally finished something on time. David smiled and turned the ship for home. The galaxy had learned who he was in 3 minutes. Understanding his wife, the historians agreed, would take considerably longer, and every species that valued its continued existence had quietly agreed to stop trying.